Where would we be today if the disciples didn't write down their stories? Don't judge it. Don't try to figure out, is it worth it or not? Just write it down. And then later you can figure out what you do with it. But I assure you, nothing happens when you keep it all inside.
Welcome to the Faith Inspire podcast by Faith and Gather. I'm your host, Erica Dvorak. Join me and the Faith and Gather community as we become faith-inspired to tackle the messy and embrace the beautiful areas of life. We're going to meet you right where you're at, right when you need it, by helping you live a less stressed, more joy-filled life lived by bold faith and walking in obedience. You have a God-sized calling, but you don't have to choose between your sanity or juggling it all. We'll keep you one step ahead, armed with knowledge to fight your everyday battles and live a life faith-inspired. Because faith is not just a belief, it's a lifestyle. God has given you a gift, the gift of your story, a story unique to you, unlike any others. A story filled with passions, experiences, joy, and life's difficulties. Your story is personal, and for that reason, it may make it tough to share. But my guest today can help you find the confidence you need to share it with clarity and boldness. Michelle Prince is a best-selling author, sought-after motivational speaker, leadership consultant, and CEO and founder of Performance Publishing Group, a partner publishing company dedicated to making a difference, one story at a time. She helps people discover their gifts, ignite their light, and illuminate the path for others, all through sharing their stories for the glory of God. Michelle has come up with the S.H.I.N.E formula, which helps others gain clarity into who they are, why they're here, and how to shine from within. It's time to stop playing small, step out of your comfort zone, and finally embrace all you were created to be. Now is your time to shine and tell your story. Hey, Michelle, welcome to the Faith Inspire podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so glad to have you. Today, we're going to chat about our stories because we all have a story that matters. It's a part of our purpose and really what God has given us to steward and a part of His greater plans. But often it can be a little tough to talk about our stories and really share what our stories are. But you have come up with a way to help people discover their gifts, ignite their light, and illuminate the path for others, all through sharing our story for the glory of God, which is just really embracing all that they can be. So I am excited to dive in and learn more about it.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about it. I love this subject.
Yeah, so I want to get started by having you share your story. You are the story lady. So if you could share your story on, how your passion really came about for helping people to find their own stories.
Well, it starts back a long time ago when I just gone off to college. My parents sent me to a Zig Ziglar conference. And it's a long story I won't go into, but I didn't want to go. And I went kicking and screaming, but it ended up being such a pivotal time in my life. And I embraced it. And so much so that I told Zig Ziglar I was going to work for him one day. And I was so sure of it. I'm 18 years old. But my path went a different way. I went to college. I graduated. I'm working in a sales job. And I end up, there's no accidents in life, right? But I cold called on the Ziglar Corporation. So a lot of my story starts with me working for Zig Ziglar and that being the foundation for my life, my journey, my views, my values, everything. And it's, Christian organization. And I left that organization to go pursue a corporate career. I wanted to climb a corporate ladder. I wanted to, I'm in my young 20s. I wanted to make more money and do all the things that I thought would make me happy. And what I found was, although I was successful, I wasn't really that happy because I wasn't connected to the source. I wasn't connected to my passion. I didn't know what my purpose was. And it was several years of me really thinking like, gosh, what would I do if I could do anything? And I just kept coming back to what we did at Ziglar, which was we motivated people, inspired people, and encouraged people just to be who God created them to be, nothing more. I'd always wanted to write a book, but I didn't really think I could. I didn't think, who am I? Who am I to write a book, right? I know many people are thinking that too. But what I did is I decided I was going to do it for my boys. At the time, my kids were both in one in kindergarten, one in second grade. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to write my story for them. And then when they grow up, they'll know their mom. And that act of just doing it for them turned into me publishing a book. But that's the book that really launched my whole career of what I get to do now, which is speaking and coaching and all. But it all ties back to story. And I think about, had I not had the courage to share my story, at the time thinking it was just for my kids, but had I not had that courage, I wouldn't be helping other people too. And so I see the connection between when we figure out our gifts, our talents, our purpose, our passions that God has so graciously given us, and then we do something with them and share them with the world, sharing our story, that's when we are the happiest. That's when we're serving Him the most. And there's so much more to it, but that's kind of ultimately how I got to what I'm doing today.
Wow, that's wonderful. And in your book, did you share the story of that progression of what it looked like, or what is the story that you shared there?
So the book I just wrote and published, Shine Through Your Story, I do. I do share that. And in fact, a lot of the book is my faith journey and how God really uses our life. So many of the places that I've been or the things that I've experienced, never in a million years would I have thought I'd be doing. But that's how God works. And it's in and through our stories, other people's stories. That's how we provide hope and encouragement. And one thing I've realized too in helping people figure out their stories is most people don't think that their stories matter, but they do. And even if it only matters to one person, it's worth telling. And so that's really where my heart is on this.
I love that. I love that because we all do have a story to tell. And I mean, when you meet with somebody, you want to get to know them. And what is your story? What does your life look like? What can I learn from you? What can I glean from you? So I absolutely love that. I do want to dig into that SHINE framework that is in your book. There's SHINE is an acronym and it's a formula that you use to help people share their story. So can you walk through SHINE for us?
I would love to, yes. So the S in Shine stands for Sow Your Seeds of Greatness. And this is really kind of based on one of my favorite quotes by Zig Ziglar, which was, man was designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. And what that means is no matter who you are, no matter where you've come from, what you've been through, you were created with seeds of greatness. So it's not a matter of do you have what it takes or not. You do, because that's how God created you. You are created in His image. So the first step is just identifying, well, what are your strengths, your gifts, your talents? What are the things that have, shaped you as a person that are unique to you? That's really the first step. And then the H in Shine is honor your story. A lot of people say, yeah, well, either my story's not that significant or it's not that great, or I've had some really bad things happen in my life. And who am I to share that story? And when I say honor, what I mean is no matter what your story is, we all go through chapters that we didn't want to experience. I believe that God's given our story to us as a gift. Gifts are meant to be given away, meaning if we have all of these experiences and if we have all of these things, good and bad, that have happened to us that maybe we've overcome, or maybe we're still in the process of overcoming, that if we could turn around and share that with someone and encourage them, that is what we're supposed to do as believers. So I encourage people to just honor it. You don't have to judge it. Your life doesn't have to be perfect, but just know you can't change your story. So why not try to leverage it and use it for good? The I in the acronym stands for identify what's holding you back. And this is, a lot of this goes into some of my own stories. So many of us are held back. We play small and we don't become all that we really are created to be. And it could be fear. It could be, negative beliefs. It could be procrastination. It could be so many things. So until you figure out what it is though, that's really holding you back, because truly you have what it takes. God's created you that way. Anything you ever want to learn in life, you can figure out through podcasting, through the Google. So what is really holding you back? And that's really what I stands for. The N is now is the time to document your story. And when I say document, I don't necessarily mean you should write a book. I am a little biased. I have a publishing company and I do love to help people write books, but documenting means journaling. It means getting all of your thoughts out of your head and onto paper. There's just something magical that happens when you write. And for me, that's when I hear what I call my downloads. I'm the closest to God when I'm writing. And so for me, that's a powerful, but document it, right? Because even if you share it with your kids, what if it was a legacy to leave on? What if you wrote something down that someday you wouldn't be here to pass on? We don't know. And the story I always tell about this part is, where would we be today if the disciples didn't write down their stories? So don't judge it. Don't try to figure out, is it worth it or not? Just write it down. And then later you can figure out what you do with it. But I assure you, nothing happens when you keep it all inside. And then the E in SHINE stands for encourage and equip others. So we are called to build the body of Christ. We are called to encourage and equip other believers. So one of the ways that I believe we do that is just by being authentic and saying, hey, if I can do this, you can do this. Or if I've been through this and I could get through this, so can you. Or if I could build this business, I mean, you can do it. I joke all the time and say, if I can write a book, trust me, you can write a book. So that's how we encourage each other. And there's a lot more to it, but ultimately it boils down to, I do believe it's Matthew 5:14 through 16, where God is calling us to shine our light. A city set on a hill is not, it's meant to be seen. And so when people say, yeah, but I don't want to make it all about me, I always counter and say, when we shine our light, it's not our light. We are merely reflecting the light of the sun. So shine on. I mean, let that light shine, because it's not about us, it's about Him.
Wonderful. And just such a simple framework to create a book or a story. I think I would love to write a book one day. That is one of my goals. I love writing and I always have since I was a child, but the thought of a book just really is so daunting because there's so much to it and how many words you have to do and pages and all of that. But this is a nice framework for you to think about what you would put in there and share your story and how you can shine that light on your story and then also glorify God with it. So I love how you created this framework.
Even you saying that you want to write a book someday, I guarantee there's so many people thinking the same. And I felt this way for so many years. I really, truly did. Especially working with Zig Ziglar, I thought, my gosh, I'm no Zig Ziglar. Who am I to write a book? What would I say that hasn't been said before? But the truth is, when we get in our head like it's such a big deal, that's what usually keeps us from doing it. But when you think about like what you're doing in this podcast, or when you go have coffee with a girlfriend, or sit down with a neighbor, you are sharing everything you would put into a book. It's just a matter of you're sharing it talking versus writing. So I always tell people, don't overthink it. Whatever the easiest way is to get that core message of yourself out, whether it be speaking it or podcasting it, whatever, just do it, because you can take that content and then get a great editor to help you pull it all together.
And it's funny you say that because I have a friend of mine who texted me one time. She's like, you've already basically written your book. Just go to your podcasts and they're all there. So maybe one day we'll see in the future that'll happen. You touched on this a little bit, but why is it important for believers specifically to tell their story?
Well, it goes back to that verse, Matthew 5:14 through 16. We're called to shine, right? So light will defeat darkness every single time. Never, ever, ever is a situation. I mean, think about this. You could be in a pitch black room and you just turn on a teeny, or you just light a match. Instantly, the darkness is illuminated instantly, just from a little source of light. We are the light of the world. Well, Jesus is the light of the world, but we are created in His image. So we're living in a very, very, very dark world. So when we light just a little bit of authenticity, just a little bit of, what, I've been where you are, or I understand what you're going through, or I actually went through that before. Let me share with you what I learned. That is us shining our light. That is us sharing our stories. And so, I think it doesn't have to be a big grand thing. It could just be somebody in the grocery store that you just give a little bit of your light to. That's really what it boils down to.
So we have this framework, but if they, say want to start their story, where do they even start with it? Because I think that's the hardest part is really like, okay, I have this and I could do all this framework, but where do I even start to think about it? How do you do that?
You're absolutely right. That is the hardest part. I do coaching and all, but I have a workshop that we teach people. It's called Bookbound. We teach people how to write a book. But this exercise is the exact same thing, whether you're writing a book, whether you're just getting clarity on if you were to maybe do some speaking or a podcast or even just coaching or even just what is the core message you could pass on to a friend. I do this exercise where you just grab a sheet of paper and create a T chart. And on the left hand side of the T, just write the word passions. And in that side, just list everything you can think of that lights you up, that you're passionate about. For example, so I love personal development and I've always loved that kind of thing. I was exposed to it at such an early age. I'm passionate about the beach and I'm passionate about my faith and I have pugs that are, there's so many funny things I could list. It doesn't have to be about a book or a big, big important story, but that is a clue. So your passion is a clue, and I'll come back to that. On the right hand side of the T chart, you write the word experiences. And this is where you write as many things as you can possibly think of. So maybe you have experience as a mom or dad. Maybe you have experience as a podcast host or in sales, or you have experience moving or traveling or writing a book. Anything that is significant that you have experienced in life goes on that side of the T. But the thing with experience is many times things we experience in life we didn't want to experience, but they still shape who you are. So maybe you've been through divorce or bankruptcy or abuse or any number of things that you may not want to talk about, but it is part of who you are and you can't change your story. So I encourage people to just get it all on paper. Nobody has to see this but you. But when you step back and you look at both lists and to do as many things on both sides as you can, if you just look at that, that is just you. That is truly, you are a combination of your passions and your experiences. So holistically, that will show you so much of who you are. But the magic comes in when really figuring out, well, but what would I share with someone if I could? Is where can you find a connection? What is something on your passion side that you really love it? And then what's on your experience side that you've actually experienced? And I'll give you some examples. So for me, I do love personal development, passionate about that. On my experience side, I worked for Zig Ziglar. That was a connection because I learned so much from him. But I share this on all podcasts, and I'm okay with this because somebody needs to hear this. One of my experiences when I was young is I had low self-esteem when I was high school, even middle school, high school. And why would that go on my list? Well, it impacted me and it shaped a lot of who I was at that stage in my life. It impacted the people I hung out with, the decisions that I made. All of those things were impacted by that. It was a big part of my life. So there's that connection. But the magic of that is I love personal development and growth, and I had to use it to get my mindset out of that area, of that kind of gutter thinking back in the day. And then, connect the fact that I learned a lot from Zig. That actually was my first book, Winning in Life Now, because I could talk about it all day long and I would be like, oh, let me tell you how to build your confidence. Let me tell you how to have a positive mindset. And that's the passion. But I'd also be like, but let me tell you what I've been through. And let me tell you how I understand. And that was just my story. So maybe you're passionate, not you personally, but maybe somebody listening is passionate about children. And maybe they've experienced losing a child. You know what I'm saying? Like, so where do you find a connection? And you'll likely find many, but this is where I, pray and ask God, what do you want me to share with the world or with my neighbor? It will jump off the page.
And people relate to stories and I can see how someone would relate to you more if you weren't only just a professional development coach who always had it right, always knew how to do it, compared to somebody who is now a professional development coach because they overcame the obstacle of low self esteem and feeling like they could never achieve what they thought they could achieve and getting past those barriers. Like that is where the humanity of it is, of like relating of, oh, you're like me. And if you were able to do it, then I can do it too. And I think that's the power behind sharing the story, is that relatability and walking with each other through that.
That's exactly what it is, 100%. Because other people do look at you and think, well, gosh, she has it all put together or he has it all together. But when we know that, wow, that person had to overcome this to be this, that inspires me. I know I keep mentioning Zig, but at the same time, he's such a great mentor for me. And if you think back to when he spoke, he told stories. And a lot of the times, and of course, he talked about, he was bigger than life in the height of his career, very, very successful. But what he would talk about was he was, born one of seven children, had no money, and lost his father at a young age. And so basically telling the story of, I'm just like you. And if I can come from lower Alabama when I had no future to where I am today, you can too. And so that's just one more example of how that works.
Yeah. So beautiful how God can use our stories like that. So when it pertains to our stories, what else do you want the listeners to know? What other kind of nuggets are in your book that you would walk away from this conversation thinking, shoot, I really wanted to talk about that, or that's just something that is ingrained in me to share as my story to really encourage and inspire.
One of the things is, and I hear this a lot, is we're like, well, but what is my story? What is my purpose? What is my passion? A lot of people struggle with that. And what I encourage you is just ask God. God isn't sitting up in heaven just like, oh, let's see if they'll figure it out. He wants us, to live with abundance, and he wants us to know his plans for us, the future that he has for us. But many times, and I'll speak for myself, many times we're so busy, we just don't stop, or we may ask, but we don't stop and just listen. And one of the things I talk about in a chapter is a prayer. I hate to use the word formula, but in a way, it is a prayer formula of, okay, how can you journal with God? Because I do believe there is something very powerful about just sitting down with pen and paper and just listening. And so what I suggest is first ask, starting with, praise. P is for praise. R is repent of any sins. But A is ask. Ask God for what you need or what you want. Y is yield, which means to stop and listen. And then the E, the acronym is prayer. And then the E is enter. Write down, enter in your journal anything you hear, even if it sounds crazy, just write it down. And then the R is respond. There's a whole lot I talk about in the book that it's in the act of obedience that we really get all of what God's wanting us to have. But I think don't struggle so much. Just spend some time in asking and journal and see what is revealed.
I think so often too, we want that immediate answer. And that I don't know if you found this, that it takes time. It takes time for that story to develop. It takes time for God to kind of download it. And because you need to run into the right person who inspires you a little bit and makes you think of something a little bit differently. And then you encounter a different situation where you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And so the continuation of the journaling and the continuation of the story, it just keeps developing. Have you found that with yourself journaling and maybe some of the people that you work with?
So, one of the reasons I am so passionate about journaling is I had a journey of my own when I was writing this book. I've written many books before and had no problem getting them out quickly and publish them. This book actually was birthed at least 4 years ago. And I'm a publisher. I know how to get books done quick. And yet this one didn't. And at one point when I was really struggling, it felt like I was supposed to go find my old journals. I've been journaling since I was in middle school, even younger, but those are the ones that started to take shape. Actually, high school and college was more so, but I went back and read them. And I encourage anyone who has old journals to do this. It was so eye opening to me, first, that I'm pretty much the exact same person I was then. I mean, in my mind, I thought, I'm so different. But really, we are who we are. Our soul is our soul. We grow, we mature, but who we are is really established at a pretty young age. And then the second part, which was the most important part, was I was blown away by all the times I prayed about something. I asked for something. I cried about something. And how God was faithful every single time. And you know what? A lot of times there was a huge gap in time that I didn't connect the dots until I went back and I read my journal and I was like, oh my gosh, he has been preparing me for this all these years. I never would have been as aware of that. I mean, I know how faithful God's been, but to see it in writing and then to see how it's come out on the other side. And I'm not saying my life has been all great and easy and we've had lots of issues and, tragedy, but I see God working in all of that. And if you journal for no other reason than that, just to know and document the faithfulness of God, that's really what our stories are about. We're supposed to be documenting how God is working in our life. and sharing.
Yes, yeah, because we so easily forget. Thank you for adding that sharing part because there's so many times I do not have a great memory. I have a very bad short-term memory and now just a long-term memory. It just, you have children, I had a mild concussion, things just don't stick anymore as they should. And so other people will remind me of things that I have gone through. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I completely forgot about that." And they're just those little stones of what God has done in my life, or little things that I have gone through that have molded me to who I am today. So journaling is a great way to help remind yourself of that, because we just live in a fast-paced world, a busy world with a lot is coming at us and our brain's just trying to file it all away. And so being able to journal that is just a good way of going back and triggering that kind of light bulb moment. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your framework. And if someone wants to connect with you, is interested about really sharing their story for their children, one person, or they have a story that they feel like they want to reach many, how can they connect with you?
Well, through social media, I'm on mostly Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram under Michelle Prince. But the book website is shinethroughyourstory.com. And you can get the book there or Amazon, anywhere. But there's some free resources on there that I would love for them to take advantage of. One of them is, if anyone's interested in getting a daily personalized scripture text to them, that is something that we just offer for anybody who's interested, and a couple other things just to encourage people along on the journey. And just to know that if they feel any nudge, that maybe God isn't nudging you to write a book, but maybe he is nudging you to see what he sees, or to see what's already there, and to just go down the path and just see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And yeah, a daily scripture. Well, who can go wrong with that?
Right? It is your name in it. I set it up in my phone, the number as the contact as God. I created this. I know what is coming. But still, every morning when I get my text message from God, it just makes me so happy. I'm like, oh, God text messaged me.
I love that. Oh my goodness. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Well, Michelle, thank you for being on. I just have one last question for you. I want to know what brought you joy today. We're coming to the end of the day, at least in my kind of neck of the woods here, and the end of the week. What brought you joy today?
Oh, what a great question. What brought me joy today is I sat outside this morning with my cup of coffee and just took it all in, the beauty of just nature and the cardinals in my backyard. The simplicity of that makes me so joyful. And it just brightens my spirit. And of course, conversations like this and the work I do. But that was probably the first ounce of joy I had this morning.
That sounds like a fantastic morning. And yeah, just listening to the birds chirp, sometimes we just don't pause to do that and hear nature communicating with each other. I think that's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing that God has created for us to enjoy that we just don't pause to do. So, what a gift that you got to experience that this morning. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for being on. Appreciate you sharing your heart, your story, and how others can create their story as well.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica. I'm so excited to be here.
You are meant to shine and be a bright light for the world. You can do that by sharing your story. So grab that pen and paper and start writing, praying, and letting God guide you. You matter. Your life matters. And so your story matters too. I'm so grateful you spent time today listening to this episode. If you were encouraged by what you heard, share the love with other women you know and send them the link to this episode. Just think how many more women could be blessed with faith inspired encouragement. Love and prayers, Erica. Congrats on saying yes to a life filled with joy and Jesus. If you want more, head to faithinspiredpodcast.com for show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform to stay faith inspired. And remember, faith is not just a belief, it's a lifestyle.